Hello, and welcome to this foster care online training webinar, Burnout and Stress in Foster Care. I'm your host, Dr. John Garmo, a foster parent and biological parent and adoptive parent myself. And I can assure you, I know very well about the burnout and stress that we face as parents. But you know what? When we care for children in foster care, it can be even more stressful. So the burnout is very, very real. And today, we're going to look at. Our goal today is to increase the awareness of the realities of burnout and stress in foster parents. We're going to increase our awareness of burnout and stress and how it impacts our lives, and we are going to gain an understanding of how to develop and implement strategies designed to aid with these feelings of stress, these feelings that we are simply exhausted, worn out, and even burned out. How do we prevent that? How do we stop that? Well, we're going to examine that today. I'm so glad you're here with me. Now, before we examine why we as foster parents face stress, it is important to understand why children in foster care face stress as well. Perhaps you've heard me talk about this in some of my other online training webinars, but I want you to imagine that 7-year-old girl, perhaps the 7-year-old girl in my book, A Different Home. This girl who's taken from her mother and her father, and she's taken from her siblings, her brothers and sisters, and from her pets and stuffed animals, and from her bedroom and house and home, taken from everything she knows, including her relatives, her friends, her schoolmates. Does not have an understanding why. She's not explained why she's taken away. She doesn't know why. All she knows is she's taken from them and placed in a strange home with strange people and told that this is her new home, her new family, your family and my family. She's taken from her school. She's taken from everything that she's familiar with. And when she wakes up that next morning after crying herself to sleep, she's going to ask herself, why am I here? When do I go home? When do I see mommy next? Why do I have to stay here? Why do I have to go to a new school? She might even have guilt. She might believe that she is at fault. She might believe that her parents no longer love her. And for some children, they simply cannot express themselves. They have the inability to express how they are feeling. Much like the 4-year-old boy that came to my house. The 4-year-old boy, as I document in my book, Fostering Love, who was burned by his mother with cigarettes on his scalp, the roof of his mouth, his tongue, and on his genitals. 4-year-old boy who had cigarette burns on his tongue and his genitals from his mother. And as you can imagine, he could not express himself. He was an emotional blank. It would be like you talking to an empty chair or a blank wall. This young fella could not express any type of emotion whatsoever. As foster parents, you and I, we invest all of our time. We invest ourselves emotionally and physically. Indeed, as foster parents, when we care for children in need, when we bring these children from foster care into our own families and into our own home, we are investing all of our lives into them. It is, I believe, the hardest job you will ever do. It surely is for me. So I want you to begin to understand this. Feelings of burnout and stress in you are very, very normal. It is so important to remember that we are often not in charge of the situation. In fact, the removal of a child from foster care from your family and your house, a child that you've come to love like your own, a child that you've come to love unconditionally, a child that has become a very important part of your family, the removal of that child could come suddenly and is often a decision made not necessarily by the caseworkers, but by the court and by a judge. Burnout is the slow growing condition that derives from stress and poor stress management. It is something that could happen over a long period of time. It is not something that happens right away. It is physical and mental exhaustion. My friend, I was there myself. 2 years ago, I remember waking up one morning and feeling I am just worn out. It was over the period of several months. My wife and I had 9 children at the time in our home. We had 3 biological, and we had 6 children from foster care in our home. And we were worn out. I was exhausted mentally, I was exhausted emotionally, and I was exhausted physically. And that particular morning, I struggled to the shower, the water came on, and I told myself, I can't do this any longer. For you see, I was burned out. I was burned out. My own wife faced that just a few months ago herself. She was burned out as well. It is a very, very real condition for foster parents, and it is very normal for you to experience that sometimes. As our burnout increases, we may feel that we have less support than needed. Now, you and I both know this. No one really understands what we do as foster parents. Our workmates don't really understand, our friends don't understand, and even members of our family don't really appreciate nor understand what we do. So there's very little real support for us. Some of us are workaholics. We just work, 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 work. I often make the joke when I travel across training foster parents across this great nation of ours, I often joke saying that I go to work to rest. Well, that's partially true because when I come home from my day job, there is all the cooking and cleaning and laundry and children who have homework and children who need to be bathed and children who need to be read to and have help with other duties and those suffering from trauma. It is exhausting. Some people are perfectionists. They seek perfection in all they do. In fact, they demand perfection in all they do. And quite simply, if you are a foster parent, I do not know how you could be a perfectionist because all the walls in my house are colored with different colors and crayons, and I have marks on the doors. I gave up a long time ago trying to be a perfectionist with my own house. Some of us, as our burnout increases, we feel powerless. We simply feel we have no power over the situation. And as we nurture and we look after others, that can be draining emotionally, physically, and mentally. And that increases our burnout as we continue to care for others who have trauma, care for others who face great anxieties, care for other children who have been abused and neglected and abandoned. And we feel we have no support, and we're workaholics, and we're perfectionists, our burnout increases. There are stages of burnout. We become tired, we become exhausted, our behavior might be affected. Sometimes we may become angry at a situation, or we may resent the foster care system. We may resent the court system. We may resent the caseworkers. We may have resentment towards the birth parents of the child, and maybe we even resent the children in our home. Some may have great sadness. Others may just become apathetic and may feel apathy towards others and towards sad situations. Some will deny they have burnout. Others will believe they need to work harder. They need to double their work efforts to, in their mind, be better foster parents, to ignore the burnout and be a better foster parent. Some of the symptoms may include minor health complaints. We may feel we have a sore back, or an upset stomach, or our shoulders are stressed, or we may suffer from headaches. For myself, it was that bad back. My back just felt weary and exhausted and sore. We may feel very, very tired. Some of us feel we may have too little sleep, while others may get too much sleep. They just believe that if they get more sleep, their burnout will decrease. That is not true. We may have changes in our appetite as well. We may become irritated. We may have feelings of irritation. We may have feelings of sadness or anger or depression. We may lack motivation. We may feel we have no motivation to do anything. Some of us may feel hopeless, and indeed, some may feel like simply running away. I must share a humorous story with you, my friend. I was at a foster care conference in another state, and I spoke to my wife, and she told me we had 3 more children coming to our home, bringing us to 11. And you know what? I told her I loved her. I got off the phone and thought, I don't want to go home. I felt like running away myself. And sometimes we have those feelings, don't we? Now, my friend, we both know that you and I, as foster parents, are not in it for the money. Society may believe that to be true. Your friends may believe that to be true. But we both know that is not the case. Indeed, being a foster parent can be stressful on our finances. Right now, I currently have 8 children in my home. And do you know how much milk I go through? I bet you do if you're a foster parent. There's all the groceries, there's additional clothing, there's transporting children back and forth to visitations, to doctors, to court appearances. There are those special occasions like birthdays and holidays where we want to just make those birthdays and holidays all the more special, so we're buying them gifts. It can be expensive. It can be expensive, and sometimes the per diem does not reimburse us fully. And that's okay. That's okay. We're not in it for the money. We're in it because we love the children. But the financial situation can be stressful to a family. Your foster care burnout could also be stressful in your workplace. You may take some of the anxieties you are facing, some of the burnout and stress you're facing to your work. It can be stressful for your family and to your health, indeed to many issues of your life. The burnout can be stressful. Now, it's important to remember this, that each child is unique and each child is different. We all have to adjust to new challenges. It is a job that we cannot get used to. But I often hear this. When a child is removed from one home, your home, and placed in another home, I often hear this from foster parents. They tell me, Dr. John, I just need another baby. I just want another child in my house. And I often ask them this, why is that? And they tell me, because I had a child leave my home and I want another one. Well, let me reassure you, my friend, you cannot replace one child with another and hope that your grief goes away. Because again, each child is different and unique. Foster parenting is not a job that we can get used to, as I stated earlier. Because each child is different and each child is unique, each child brings to your family and to your home different challenges, different anxieties, different traumas, and different difficulties. And that is part of the stress of being a foster parent, because it's not a job that we can do lightly. Sometimes we bring in those children who have learning disabilities and learning disorders, and they struggle in school, and that can be stressful in our family. Then there are those children who suffer from behavioral issues. Now, if you've read my book, Love and Mayhem, then you know that we had a child in our home who suffered from reactive attachment disorder. He was full of anger and frustration and great anxiety, and that brought stress to my own family. Sometimes children have health issues, or they may have emotional issues, and all that adds to the stress to your own family and to your own life. Then there are those biological family members who may add stress to your own. Perhaps a biological family member is bringing against you a false accusation. Maybe they're having a difficult time working with the visitations. Maybe they have said negative or harmful things about you or towards you. My friend, these are all normal. It's happened to me as a foster parent, and I'm sure it'll happen to me again. Sometimes you may have a difficult working relationship with your caseworker. Sometimes healthcare providers may have a difficult time working with you. I've been to the doctor a few times for numerous children, and I've had some difficult moments. You may suffer from grief and loss over a child, and then the additional workload that the child brings to your home. That additional laundry, the additional cooking, the additional cleaning, those late nights where you're feeding a child or changing diapers, the child who is screaming in the middle of the night or refuses to do what you ask him to do in the daytime. Hey, those all add up to stress, and it helps increase the burnout you face. It is so important that you learn how to manage your own health and your own well-being. If you do not manage these, you're going to have a difficult time managing your marriage, the members in your family, and the children who are in your home from foster care. As foster parents, as I said earlier, we invest our time. It is a 365-day job a year, 24 hours a day, every single day of the week. We invest ourselves emotionally, physically, and as I stated earlier, our entire life. Feelings of grief and loss when a child leaves your home are very normal. Very normal. If you feel grief when a child leaves your home and you are spending days crying or a pit in your stomach or a weight on your shoulders and you just are in tremendous sadness because a child from foster care left your home, that's normal. That is very, very normal. You have loved that child with all that you have. That child was a member of your family. Displacement, as we must remember, it's not your fault. You are oftentimes not in charge of the situation, and that does lead to your more stress. You may suffer from secondary traumatic stress. Dr. Charles Figley said, secondary traumatic stress is the natural consequent behaviors resulting from knowledge about a traumatizing event experienced by a significant other. It is the stress resulting from or helping or wanting to help a traumatized or suffering person. Indeed, it is very similar to post-traumatic stress disorder. The difference, though, is the experience. One who suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, has experienced the trauma. Somebody who experiences secondary traumatic stress is experiencing the trauma from somebody else, from wanting to help somebody else, or wishing to help somebody else. They experience it through somebody else's own trauma. Some of the reasons for secondary traumatic stress: we may over-empathize or over-identify with the children, placing ourselves at internalizing the problem. This, my friend, is what happens to me. When a child comes into my home and they are suffering from trauma and anxiety, I internalize their problems. I take it on my own shoulders. I take it into my own heart. Sometimes we may not give ourselves enough time to recover from when a child leaves our home. See, when we listen to and we live with the horror stories over and over and over, from one child to another child to another child to another child, and not give ourselves a break in between at some point, this can have a negative effect, and it is yet another reason for secondary traumatic stress. Our own trauma, our own personal trauma may be a reason for secondary traumatic stress. Our own pain and trauma may be unresolved. Perhaps you were abused as a child yourself. Perhaps you were abandoned or neglected. Perhaps you experienced some type of sexual or physical abuse, and you never were able to resolve it. When a child comes into your home and has experienced the same, your own feelings, your own pain may resurface as you experience a child's trauma. We may have strong emotional reactions to the children and their situations as well. We may react so strongly to the stress that they are going through that it becomes part of our own stress. Some of the symptoms are anger and anxiety. We may experience deep sadness or prolonged grief. We may become cynical We may become irritable, angry, and frustrated. We may have mood swings, or we may just feel like we need to shut ourselves off from the rest of the world and become self-isolated. We may have backaches or exhaustion. My wife suffers from great headaches. Indeed, she suffers sadly from migraines. We may have stomach aches, and we just may feel weary. The weariness is overwhelming, and we cannot deal with it. Now, how can social workers, how can caseworkers help us as foster parents when we are experiencing burnout, when we are experiencing stress? Well, to begin with, caseworkers can be honest and direct about the duration of the time the child is going to spend in your home. Now, I know that this cannot be all the time. Many times, caseworkers simply don't know. They don't have the answers. But if you do, as a caseworker, be as honest as you can about how long that child is going to stay in your home. Because this will help me and other foster parents prepare ourselves. Now, I'm the type of foster parent who is always asking questions. When the phone rings from a caseworker, I always want to know how did court go, how did the visitation go, how is the parent doing with their caseload, is the child leaving anytime soon? See, I want to know. I want to know as much as I can about the child because it helps me be a better foster parent to that child. I have more information, I have more knowledge, and I can address the issues. So share as much information as you can constantly with your foster parents. Allocate resources. Give them as much information as you can, and if possible, have stability with the same caseworker for foster parents. So caseworkers, if you can have stability with your foster parents, if you can have the same foster parents child after child after child, that allows us as foster parents to build a healthy working relationship. We get to know you as a caseworker, and you get to know us. You know our difficulties, you know our pluses, our minuses, our strengths, our weaknesses. That's wonderful. That's so helpful. Increase training in stress release to foster parents. Now, the very best thing my caseworker did for me as a foster parent was shortly after my initial training ended, my caseworker helped my wife and I and the other foster parents set up a foster parent association in our town, a support group, if you will. And I'm going to share some information why that's so important to me. See, as I mentioned earlier, nobody understands a foster parent like another foster parent. Isn't that right? Absolutely. So when I have my monthly Foster Parent Association support group meetings, I am there with people who relate to me and I can relate to them. See, we can share stories, we can laugh with each other, and we can cry along with each other, and I'm able to gain valuable wisdom from their own experiences. See, if I have a problem that I'm experiencing right now as a foster parent, and I express it with them and share it with them, to begin with, they are not going to deny I had those feelings. They're not going to turn their back. They're not going to snicker at me. They're not going to think I'm odd or strange because they may have experienced themselves. And if they have experienced themselves, I'm going to listen to them and I'm going to learn from their own experiences and gain wisdom from their knowledge. And finally, in our foster parent support groups, we have training. So our training hours are able to increase each month throughout the year as well. But I need to tell you this. I love my foster parent association group. So caseworkers, if you live in an area where there is no foster parent association, I would encourage you to form one. Now, as foster parents, as I mentioned, there's a support group right there on top. You can find so much emotional release and relief within your foster parent association group. And if you do not have one, contact your caseworker to help you set one up, or contact me and I'll try to give you some tips on how to do that. My wife, she loves to write in her journal, her diary. After a child leaves our home and she's experiencing tremendous grief, as she does, she writes. She gets her feelings out on paper. She releases all the emotions on the paper, and she doesn't look at them. She just puts them away when she's done. But she's able to, express herself, get it out of herself instead of bottling it within. So perhaps a journal or a diary might be helpful for you. Exercise is a wonderful way to release stress and relief from burnout. Exercise can go a long ways. If possible, learn how to relax. Now, my wife, she crawls into bed every evening about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and she tells me this. She says, I'm very, very busy. I'm very, very busy. And you know what she does? She pulls out her computer or her iPad or her phone, and she plays Candy Crush or some other game on the computer. For her, she's able to relax. She does something that completely mindless, and she's able to relax. For me, I love to go into the garden. I love to weed or cut flowers or transplant flowers or prune back bushes, whatever it may be. But for me, the garden is a place where I can relax. Perhaps prayer time is a time for you to relax as well. Set a schedule. Set your daily schedule if possible and try to be consistent with that day-to-day schedule. Now, I am a foster parent. I know that things pop up, and I know that we must be extremely flexible as foster parents because oftentimes it does not go as planned, does it? But if possible, if you have the opportunity, set a schedule and try to stick with it and be consistent. That will help in relieving stress. Eat healthy. That may seem very simplistic, but it goes a long ways. A healthy diet goes a long ways towards helping yourself physically and in stress. Keep that journal. Share the load. Don't do it all by yourself. Don't expect to be able to do it by yourself. Rely on your partner. Rely on your spouse. Encourage and ask your children, your own children, to help with the load. Perhaps they could do help with the laundry or the cooking or the cleaning or maybe even childcare. Now take time for yourself as well. Maybe you just need to go away by yourself for a few hours. Maybe you need to duck out to the movies or go shopping, or maybe you need to just have a little time in the hotel room for 24 hours to relieve your stress. And it's okay to see a counselor about this as well. And take care of your marriage. If you watched my foster care online training webinar for marriages, you know that marriages can be under attack while caring for children in foster care because marriages face particular challenges and stresses while caring for kids. So make sure that you take care of your marriage. Make your marriage a priority because if your marriage falls apart, your foster parenting is surely to fall apart. Take care of the children, of all the children in your house. Make sure they're healthy. Make sure they're happy. Just take care of them. Because if you're taking care of them, it's going to make your job a little easier so they don't have those sicknesses and those illnesses. And if needed, use respite care. Maybe you need to call up your foster care caseworker and say, I just need a little break. Could the children from my home go into respite care for a few days while my wife and I, or my family and I, have a little vacation? We just have a little break. It's there. Use it if you need it. Finally, go online. Read books. Find ways on how to reduce burnout and stress. If you are not a healthy foster parent, my friend, if you're not a healthy foster family, there is no way in the world you're going to be healthy for the children in your home. We talk a lot about this in my radio program, Foster Talk with Dr. John, each Monday. You can find out more about it on my radio program. Tune in. And there's my information there as well. You'll find lots of resources. I've written many articles about this very, very topic. In fact, I've also had videos on my Foster Care 101 video series about this as well. You can find those on my website, as well as on my Facebook page and Twitter. And if you have a particular question, please never, ever hesitate to contact me via email, drjohndegarmo@gmail.com. I am here to answer your questions. I'm with it just like you. I'm a foster parent myself. I know what you're going through, and I'm here to help you. One of the great stresses foster parents face is the dangers and the anxieties and the challenges that every single child in foster care faces with today's online technology and social networking. Do not ignore this problem. I believe it's the most relevant issue facing foster care today. This is one book. If you have children in your home, this is one book you need to have. And I've written many other books as well. My friends, thank you so much for joining me on this training webinar. Thank you for caring for the children in need. Do not ignore the feelings of stress that you have right now. Do not ignore the burnout that you might be feeling right now. We've talked about ways to relieve this. Use those techniques. Thank you so much for being a part of this program. Thank you for caring for children in need. I'm Dr. John DeGarmo.